Welcome to Post-Burnout.com interviews. My name is Aaron Kavanagh and I'm the website's founder and editor-in-chief. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. Our interviews are mainly recorded to be transcribed, but every now and again we release the audio in a series we call Post-Burnout.com interviews. If you enjoy what we do, be sure to subscribe. Last week we released our first ever double feature for the podcast and it seemed to get a lot of positive feedback, so this week we're doing it again. The connective tissue between these two acts is that they both released music on Friday the 13th this year. In the first half we speak with the Dublin folk singer-songwriter Niamh Bury about her music, getting signed to the legendary Claddagh Records, performing with acts like Dermot and Vagabonds, her roller coaster 2023 and more. In the second half we speak with the Donegal alternative singer-songwriter George Houston about his latest horror-themed album Vehicular Suicide, which was released on Friday the 13th. We also discuss the album's criticism of true crime fascination and its influence from campy B horror films. We talk about the significance of albums in the era of short attention spans and how the 2020 lockdowns ruined George's Leaving Cert, which made him able to concentrate on making music. I also want to note that during George's interview, for some reason my laptop picked up the wrong microphone, so I'm not sure if it's even really noticeable, but yeah, there is a bit of a sound quality difference for the first half of George's interview.
Hello.
Hi Niamh, how's it going?
Hi, good.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, you too. How are you?
I'm grand. Yourself?
Yeah, good. All good.
Perfect. Yeah, I just had a few questions. So the first thing I wanted to ask is obviously 2023 has been like a real kind of roller coaster explosion for you. Uh, of your kind of like years of doing music, like how does this one compare to like other years? Because from an outsider's perspective, it feels very like just looking in, it feels very I don't know, like everything's just kind of happening at once. But I don't know, maybe for you, is it more gradual or does it have that same feeling too?
Yes, I would say very gradual. Everything that you see has been in the works for a long time. So, yeah, I suppose I've been making music for I've been writing songs for a long time since I was a teenager. So it's all I guess this is the first year that I'm actually properly releasing stuff. So it does feel different in terms of I'm actually getting some feedback now and yeah, and I'm kind of doing it on a bigger scale, but yeah, the songs are a few years old, so they've been in my life for a long time.
Well,
Yeah.
I know your background. You actually come from kind of a musical family. Growing up, was there kind of an expectation that you become a musician, or were your family kind of content to just let you do your own thing?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any expectation. Neither of my parents would put any pressure on me.
Yeah.
A lot of my family are like teachers as well, and they're quite academic. So I think, yeah, there's, that was kind of maybe more of an expectation, but yeah, I'm here now. So
So you were, so it was very like organically inspired, like coming from your family. So, would you have had like, would you have been sharing kind of like what your family was listening to, or would you have had your own kind of musical trajectory in terms of what you were listening to at that time?
yeah, I think I'm very influenced by what my family was listening to. Like we'd have a lot of kind of 60s, 70s folk around when I was growing up. And then my brother was a big influence on me. He's a good bit older. He's 9 years older than me. So I just thought everything he did was very, very cool. So yeah, he passed a lot of like 90s grunge bands onto me. And yeah, some singer-songwriters like Jeff Buckley and Fiona Apple are huge for me, and that comes from him. So yes, I'm very grateful for them to have good taste in music.
And then when it actually kind of came to like what you did like academically, were you studying music or was music just kind of a hobby you were doing on the side?
Yeah, so I did study music. I studied it for a year in university. But I dropped it because I was doing voice training and I really felt uncomfortable with it because I've always sort of seen my voice as something that's like uh I don't know, quite mystical to me in a way.
Yeah.
Like it's just like an organic part of me and I never liked the sound of training it. Like now that I get older, I see the value of like keeping your vocal health and everything like that. So maybe I was a bit naive back then, and I could have stuck with it. But yeah, no, I did study music, but I majored in English literature. So that's kind of my main background, and I ended up doing my master's in it as well. So yeah,
I'm
which kind
actually
of feeds into my songwriting.
I'm actually quite interested in that thing you were talking about, where it's like, kind of putting academic procedures towards, very, I don't know, like you're saying, that kind of, it seems kind of mythical in a way, like just like music in general, like, the kind of like, I don't know, I kind of have a similar feeling too, where it's like, I think by trying to objectively observe music and the effects it has on people in a kind of, detached academic or, what do you call it, like analytical kind of way, it does sort of ruin the music a bit. Would you agree with that?
Um, yeah, I think it's really interesting as well. Like, yeah, it's such like music is such an intuitive um thing that's it's so much in the body as well that it's kind of trying to dissect it with your head doesn't always really work. But yeah, like for me when I'm writing a song, I'm much more intuitive with the music, and I'll tend like the lyrics are uh much more something that I will critique myself and work on and rework. Whereas the music is kind of like it's generally something that's just kind of instant and comes out. Um, so yeah, I like to try and get the balance with that, because I think there is a balance, like not to overanalyze things and let them flow, but still, obviously you want them to be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when it kind of came to the musical trajectory you're on now, I mean, I correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it started around 2014. Would that be correct?
Um, I don't know. What happened in 2014?
Well, I was told that's so maybe I'm getting them mixed up, but I was told you were at a music festival in Donegal. Is that correct? And then from there,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. Yes, yes.
If I'm
Yeah,
maybe if correct, you can correct me. I don't mind.
yeah, no, sorry, I was just yeah, yeah. So I'm very involved in traditional singing as well, Irish traditional singing. So that's kind of another part of what I do outside of songwriting. But yeah, so that came about out when I finished college, and I was yeah, I suppose kind of I was sort of searching for a bit of a musical scene because there was nothing really kind of speaking to me at that time. But then I sort of met a crowd of young traditional singers, and it blew me away that they were into the same sort of old songs as I was. So yeah, I suppose that has now become known as the folk revival in Dublin. Love it or like it as a hate it as a name. But yeah, I think there's definitely something in the water going on in Dublin, and yeah, there's some amazing artists and amazing musicians around. So yeah.
One thing I'd like to pick your brain about a bit is I actually recently had a discussion. It was like a three and a half hour long podcast I did with a guy called Michael Murphy. He's a lecturer and music historian, and
Yeah.
we're kind of talking about like when Ireland actually gained independence from Britain in the early 20th century. There was this kind of project to bring about sort of bring about kind of like maintaining kind of Irish culture in the arts and in the language and stuff. And
Mm.
there was an initial fear when kind of jazz was coming to Ireland and when other kind of music was coming to Ireland that would sort of dilute Irish musical tradition. But if anything, I think like what the 20th century and now the 21st century is kind of proven is that it's actually kind of strengthened it as much as like new musicians come along. There's like trad fusion, there's like trad incorporation in rock and roll, in punk rock, in rave music and hip hop, that it seems like the kind of Irish traditional music tradition like doesn't really dissipate and in fact just kind of persists with each new generation that comes along. I was wondering, in your opinion, why do you think not only like Irish trad and Irish folk kind of has a persistence, but simultaneously it's something that kind of seemingly works so well with so many different genres?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think um yeah, I think like the music and the songs and the themes and the topics that are covered are so strong and solid that I don't think they're ever going to go anywhere. They're very universal. So I think that it lends itself in that way. It's also like it's very much a living, breathing tradition. So I agree, it can only really be strengthened. I think um there's kind of like to me when it's performed in a session, which is still very alive and well, it's kind of in its purest form, and there's different etiquette rules and different things around that keep it the way, like keep the tunes uh pure almost. I don't know if the word pure is right in that context, but I think that in itself is strong enough, and I don't think it's going anywhere. So I think there is definitely room to experiment. And I think with musicians coming up now, like a lot of us will have been influenced by loads of things during our teenage years. Like, obviously Lancome have talked a lot about punk and hardcore metal, film
Yeah.
scores even probably. Um, so yeah, I think there is a lot of room for experimentation, and that's how it grows and stays alive. So yeah.
What I think is quite cool about it is actually you see the resonance it has outside of Ireland. Like, because for years it was sort of known that there was an audience for it in like the US and in England from Irish expats. But then you see it kind of like organically grow from people who aren't in that. Like, I don't know why, but Germany has a big Irish trad scene for some reason. They love it
Hmm.
there.
Yeah.
I know a
Yeah.
friend of yours, Vagabonds, Phoebe Bridgers, I think, called them like her favorite Irish actor, something like that. So I mean, you see this like kind of like not only growth but like persistence and you see it kind of resonating with people of other cultures and stuff. And I do think there is like I don't know, it's not something that's ever going to go away. I don't think, and I think that's quite lovely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something very expansive in Irish music, and it's very inclusive, and it covers like the total range of emotions. Like you'll get airs that will bring you to your knees in tears, and you'll get, really uplifting jigs that you'd like want to play at a wedding and dance with people. And like, yeah, I think it's just it kind of yeah, it's like literally music for everyone and every occasion. So I don't know if that's the reason why it's so popular everywhere else, but yeah, it's really interesting to me as well. I don't know the answer.
I want to talk also. You're recently signed with Claddagh Records, who are famous Irish, like one of the first, I guess, like truly like organic kind of domestic record labels, perhaps. Well, I think they're probably best known for their work with the Chieftains. It's interesting that I believe it's just you and Oxen are the recently signed artists. Like I think it's like in like 2 decades or something, the first signed artists. That they've brought on. I think it's cool that like project too is expanding. The Claddagh Records is expanding too. Yeah, I was wondering like how'd you get involved with that, and generally what's it kind of like to be sort of part of that lineage? Is it vindicating, or how does it feel? I guess.
Yeah, so I got involved. I guess they approached me probably about a year ago. I I recorded an album, and so they were pretty happy that I had that and I could show it to them and they liked it. So yeah, I'm really happy to be working with them. It's interesting because obviously they are known as a trad label. Um Trad slash folk,
Sure.
which however you want to define that. But the songs I'm bringing out aren't trad, they're my
Yeah.
own. Um so Yeah, it's great. Like they've been really great to work with, and I think there's a lot of positivity because, as you say, it is the most iconic label in Ireland, and it's great to be working with people who are actually on the ground in Dublin. Um, so yeah, no, it's a total honor, like to, it's such a historical label, and it's brought out some amazing music over the years, and like yeah, the founder, Gareth de Bruyne, was like a serious patron of the arts, like not only a businessman, he was actually, just really loved Irish music and thought that it should be elevated to the level of rock and roll and everything else that was more popular in the 70s. And so yeah, no, it's a huge honor, and yeah, I feel very lucky and privileged to be part of it. So
Well, you mentioned that you recorded an album. How do you feel like from that initial recording, I guess, which is the recording which got you signed to now, has there been much difference in terms of the music that we're hearing versus that original recording?
no, so I yeah, the album was totally finished and is still, I'm trickling out the tracks now.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, the music didn't change at all since then. Um, yeah, yeah.
So when was the actual album recorded then? And like, what was it? Like, where was it produced and recorded and such?
Yeah, so I recorded it. I don't know. We haven't like
Oh,
announced
that's
the
okay.
album, but I think I could like talk about it. I recorded it I started recording it in 2021. So it's been finished for about a year and a half now. Which is great. I think that's kind of like the symptom of the first album. It kind of just takes longer.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I recorded it with Brian McGlynn from Me Vagabonds. So he engineered it and produced it with me and mixed it. And then I have some really great musicians on it as well. So we recorded it in Black Mountain Studio in County Louth, which is a really lovely place. And yeah, we had a few sessions. So there was one in July 2021 where it was really hot and felt like Italy, felt like another world. So yeah, it was kind of like half a lockdown project as well. We were still very much like, I didn't know whether it was going to go ahead, and I was kind of hoping that when we were doing the sessions, people wouldn't text me and tell me they had COVID and stuff. So um yeah, so it's gonna be great to like get it out, and yeah, I can't wait.
One thing I was interested with the songs is that having released them as singles, like I think there's what's interesting is there's like a very like long form storytelling that you seem to enjoy. And what I like about the song lengths, for example, is that they're like upwards of like 4 to 6 minutes long. And like, obviously if you were like pushing singles in kind of the era of like making sure to get on the radio, like that would just be like no, you know. Um but do you think it's like cool to kind of have that, I guess, kind of creative liberty to make songs as long as they need to be, and not have to worry about like time restraints for a radio program or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, basically all of the songs were written before I even thought of releasing them. So I wasn't writing anything with radio in mind, or with the 3:30 mark in mind.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think there was a lot of freedom in it for sure. Yeah, it's funny now because I play back Beehive and I'm like, why is it 5.5 minutes? Why does it take me that long to tell the story? But yeah, no, I mean, lyrics and the story itself of the songs are really important to me. So um yeah, it's funny because I've been writing recently again now, and I don't know if my approach is going to change. But yeah, it is interesting. Yeah, I think um as best as possible to keep the audience out of your mind while the writing process is going on is probably the safest bet. And then obviously like production and recording is another stage. So that can you can tighten things up and whatever. But uh, yeah, I didn't intend to write nearly 6 minute long songs.
I was wondering too, like also kind of being on the label that you're on. I mean, I think a lot of like modern labels kind of push for sort of TikToks and Instagram reels for things to be as kind of concise as possible. I don't get that feeling from Claddagh Records, to be honest. Like I don't think like they're probably pushing that on you. Is that kind of like a freedom too that you kind of enjoy with your label versus maybe other people that are on labels?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a weird world out there. Like the music industry is, it's obviously it's always evolving, but yeah, I think, Claddagh are a, a record label, so like they are aware of like the importance of social media and the little sound bites and everything. But no, they're not putting too much pressure on me. I mean, if I had my way, I wouldn't engage with social media at all, probably. But no, I mean, I don't really mean that. I mean, there are definitely loads of positives to it. And it can be really fun. But I think like, yeah, when like I didn't grow up like, with the internet as a kid. So I'm not yeah, it's not like my favorite thing to do in the room. But it's important, and it does get the music out there. So again, it's all about the balance. Yeah.
Fair enough. One last thing I'd like to ask is about kind of like some of the sports that you've done. You've performed obviously with you Vagabonds. You performed with Dermot and so on. Yeah, I was wondering, like, do you find that kind of like when it kind of comes to when it kind of comes to like performing for another artist's audience essentially, there's that kind of like immediate resonance that you might get like doing a headline show. Do you find that it's like people are receptive, or how's that kind of experience been in terms of like being a sport act?
Um, yeah, I think generally the people I've opened for are the audience would probably like my music, but it's always hard. Like if someone's never heard your songs before, you're having to win them over. So no, I have a lot of respect for anyone who does opening slots, and like they are, you know, bread and butter for a lot of people. And great to get new people hearing your songs, but yeah, they can be tough. I haven't been heckled yet, which is good. Yeah, I think generally like folk crowds are just quite nice and lovely anyway. So yeah, it's good. I haven't had any tomatoes thrown at me.
Well, when doing like support slots or festival slots, I mean, obviously we were talking about kind of your songs being somewhat long form. Do you often find it difficult to condense into like the time allotted for a support slot or for a festival slot?
No, not really. No, I just played two songs and then the half an
And one final thing I'd like to ask is, when it kind of comes to we're talking about like storytelling in your music, um, if you were to like kind of create a second album, do you find that like an overarching story throughout would be something that'd be appealing to you, kind of like a concept record essentially, or do you prefer kind of like each song being its own narrative from start to finish?
Yeah, or I guess I do sort of think of songs as being individual worlds in themselves. So I've never really thought of doing a concept album. But there are sort of themes like with this album I've made, that themes that kind of, whether it kind of just summarizes a part of my life and what I was experiencing. But there is kind of, to me, it might not be obvious to other people, but there is kind of an overarching theme. Yeah, and for the next one, I don't know. I feel like there might be more love songs, which I haven't, uh, which the album I have recorded isn't really, there's no real love songs on it. So that would be interesting to me if it went into that territory. We'll see.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
perfect. Thank you very much for your time. I think I've asked everything I had to ask. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up, or
No, that's great.
perfect? Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, no worries.
Take care.
All right. Chat to you. Bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good. How are you?
I'm glad yourself.
Hi, good, thank you.
Perfect. Uh, yeah, first thing I wanted to ask you simply is how you kind of got into music yourself and kind of what made you want to become a musician.
Um, I'm not so sure. I've always grown up, or I have a brother and a sister, and our parents always encouraged us to play instruments. We've always been listening to music. It's just always been there in the background, and we've been encouraged to like go into that kind of creative space. And growing up, I was very indecisive on what I wanted to be. I kind of wanted to be a lot of things, and it was always in the creative field. And I found with music, um, that way I could sing, I could write, I could make videos, I could design outfits, and it kind of I could do so many different things when it came to music. And um, yeah, I just was food for the soul. And around the age of 16, I started writing songs and I just loved it so much. Never looked back, really.
What do you think of like performing live for the first time and things like that? Like how did that go initially?
What do you mean?
Like when you first started actually performing your music to an audience, how did that kind of go initially?
Oh, I don't know. I think when I'm on stage, it's probably me at my most comfortable. I love performing.
Mhm.
Um, I've always responded well. I don't know. Yeah, I suppose I started performing in front of family. It's probably where most people start performing as a
Mhm.
child, probably doing fancy dress kind of shows for your parents, and then
Yeah.
you get notions about yourself, and then I don't know, you start doing school plays, and yeah, I don't know. I never really thought about where it came from. It just developed very organically to sing live and do shows and things like that. That's a really bad answer.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so then the kind of like the current trajectory you're on in terms of the music you're making now, when did that kind of start? Like when did you
Mm.
start kind of going like I'm going to try and do this like actually professionally and for it to be some like start like actually releasing music to kind of like a mass audience.
Yeah. Well, I'm part of the COVID year of
Mhm.
Leaving Cert students. I was in the Leaving Cert in 2020. So it shut down like halfway between our year, and we were told that we're not going to be finishing school, and we're not going to be doing the Leaving Cert, which was fine. It wasn't my priority. My priority was to go into music, but it really turned into a really great opportunity for me to record at home during the lockdowns. I recorded some singles, and yeah, I it was kind of always my plan, but I had always been frightened to put my own work out there. But the lockdowns gave me this really rare opportunity to not have to see anybody that I knew for like 5 or 6 months. And it kind of gave me a little boost of confidence to just know that I have space to kind of try something new. And then when I put everything out, people were so lovely and they reacted so kindly to the music that yeah, I just got such joy from it, and I just kept releasing things and recording.
The kind of music you're making is very eclectic. It's very kind of like it incorporates a lot of like music from pop to rock and roll to kind of just everything.
Mm.
It's very kind of like experimental, very left of field. Were people kind of receptive to that
Yeah.
initially, like from the get-go, or was it kind of something that people had to warm to?
Um, I don't know. I think that there's a real market for it because personally, I'm an eclectic person music taste wise. Like I love folk and rock and psychedelic rock, and I like hip hop sometimes. I like house funk. Like I don't know. I'm not picky when it comes to the music I listen to. And I think just because there's so many people, well, it's not the people, there's so many industry people that are like trying to push and encourage artists to fit into what would be good for a playlist. And they want artists to be playlistable. They want them to be, I suppose, pigeonholable. That's not a term, but they want you to fit in this box. But that's not how I listen to music. And like just by default, if it's not how I listen to music, of course, there's going to be other eclectic music listeners that probably my music is perfect for because it's not so um uptight and like who cares if I'm kind of bending the walls of the genres. I don't anyway. I It's kind of why I like it so much. It's just using genre as a tool on top of songwriting and instrumentation to actually get across the theme or the feeling of the song and story that I'm telling.
Yeah, and I mean, like you were talking about, like how you kind of started after Leaving Cert in 2020, and what's very interesting is that like you've definitely you've definitely have not like stopped. Your output's been very plentiful. I mean, in 2021 you had the Cold Toast album come out. Last year you had the Undesired album come out, and then this year you have like Vehicular Suicide, excuse me.
Mhm.
So like the output's been like kind of constant since. Do you just have like so much stuff kind of backlog in terms of musical creation, or is this kind of more of an evolving thing gradually?
Um, I I don't know. I suppose the last 20 years of music in the industry, I think, is very, it's so business orientated and it's so money orientated because the people at the top, they're just trying to make the biggest profit. So what makes the biggest profit for them is doing singles, singles, singles. They
Mhm.
want cheap thrills. They want to get that kind of minimum effort, maximum reward. Um, get one song on a playlist and live off that for a couple of months.
Yeah.
Repeat, repeat, repeat. So I'm kind of, again, I'm against the whole idea. I miss that whole idea. I miss back when artists were encouraged to put out records and they were encouraged to put out full albums and bodies of work because I don't know what it is. I personally, I just love writing songs and it comes quite naturally to me. And yeah, I'd always like to look at myself as an album artist and kind of going back to before the industry tried to get all of the musicians just doing what was most profitable. I'd rather have some bodies of work and playlists out, like, well, call them playlists, but they're like, well, albums, obviously, but they're kind of, what you call it, like hand selected playlists by the
Mhm.
artists, because, yeah, I suppose that's what an album is.
Do you
That's a
enjoy the
bad
kind
answer.
Do you enjoy the resurgence of vinyl in the sense that it's shown not only that people like younger people still have an interest in actually buying full albums, listening to full albums, but in a way with vinyl, the kind of as you're saying, that kind of dictated curation of music is sort of what you have to listen to. You don't really have the kind of freedom that you might have on streaming or even CDs to kind of just like skip around and listen in the order you'd like to.
Yeah, I would love to get a vinyl version of one of my albums. It's definitely on my list of things to do. Um, but yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing. Like, although it's like you don't want too much waste in the world, I do
Mhm.
think that currently the population that we have is has such a an attention span deficit. I don't know what the best term is to describe that, but
I get what you're saying, yeah.
if yeah, if there's something in music that's getting our generation to sit down, put on a vinyl, and actually wait to flip over the other side, that's like an amazing feat, considering they're expecting to just click away from a 20-second video every five, and like monotonously on TikTok and things like that. Yeah, probably does the world of good to kind of get them out of that headspace of just constant I don't know, what's the word? Like constant
Stimulation, I
input.
guess.
I don't know.
Yeah, and actually, one thing that I think is interesting because you're talking about kind of like the industry there, and on the one hand, like you were kind of mentioning it, like one of the benefits, say, being on a label is, it's easier to get kind of like vinyl produced and stuff like that. But then the other hand, because like you self-released your music, so one thing that I think is like cool is that like you can come up with an album title like Vehicular Suicide and like not have to worry about like a bunch of people debating like, is that okay to say? Is that okay to use? It's one of those things where I was like, listen, like
Hmm.
just like the album title, it's very striking and you can go like I can imagine like that if it was on a label kind of being held up by a bunch of negotiations and kind of red tape
Hmm.
about discussions about whether or not that's acceptable or whatever. Yeah, do you feel that way?
Um, uh,
I
yeah,
guess
like
just what I'm saying is like you have
I
that
don't
kind of
know.
like freedom, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to gauge that because I've never had to consider asking someone else. Like, I've just always had that freedom when it came to putting my own music out. I remember the first song I put out, I wanted to get that whole thing out of the way of I didn't want people to think I would ever be afraid to put out anything. The first song I put out was called Boo Fucking Who,
Mhm.
which isn't like a crazy name or anything really, but I did want to kind of get that just to clear the air and let people know, okay, I'm not going to be just playing things that are radio friendly all the time because yeah, my priority isn't what's radio playable. It's not what's playlistable. Um, I'm just at my house writing songs, and I'm not going to filter that, which
Yeah.
I think is a good thing, and hopefully it's more refreshing than all of the, I don't know, label friendly music. But yeah, I don't know. I've never been able to really compare the freedom I have. I guess I'm pretty blessed to not have someone nagging at my shoulder saying, "Oh, you can't write this album because, you know, it's nice."
Let's talk about the album then. So, in my opinion, and I'm not just saying this to be polite or to, kind of gas you up or anything, but legitimately, I think it like might be one of the most interesting records I've listened to this year. It's called Vehicular
Oh,
Suicide,
thank you.
and the album kind of has this sort of like the album cover, even before you listen to it, I think that actually has a good kind of has kind of hyper realistic kind of it almost looks like a Dario Argento kind of still from like one of his films. It has a kind of very hyper realistic kind of color palette of kind of blue and red, and the album kind of has I think a kind of like sort of campy kind of B movie vibe to it, and it's kind of
Mhm.
aesthetic and veneer. At the same time, it's not too like when you actually listen to the songs, they're not too dissimilar to what you put out previously. It's not like so unfamiliar or anything, but at the same time, like there is this
Mhm.
very clear, distinct veneer to it that establishes itself as being different from the rest of your releases. Um, I thought it was interesting, like how kind of you were kind of like talking about like a lot of um like with the title track, for example, like it seemed to be a very pointed critique of kind of our current obsession with say like true crime and
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dahmer and like the Dahmer series that was released on Netflix and stuff, and like voices are entertainment like human misery. I was wondering if maybe you could talk about the album and kind of the concept behind it.
Yeah. Um, sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could talk about like the kind of concept behind the record.
Oh, right, yeah. Uh, hmm. I suppose. the concept behind the album, it's kind of about, I wanted the album to be like a horror film, basically. I wanted it to run like a horror film, and feel like, as you're saying, like a B, what is it, a B side,
Yeah,
B film?
yeah,
Like
B
a,
movie, I think, yeah.
yeah, like a cheesy 70s film that like, I say cheesy, but what I really mean is charming, because I love old horror films and I love when you can see the craft of practical effects and things like that. And I wanted to bring that through on the production of, because this is the first album where I actually ever got someone to come in with real drums and play drums and real bass. Usually I was doing synths and loops and things like that.
Mhm.
I'm still learning as a producer. I'm not promising to be like an amazing standard. Like on the first two albums, it's me learning how to do all of these things, and I think, yeah, I suppose I'm probably getting better. I've still lots of room to improve, which I'm willing to do. But I think with this album, um, I suppose it's gotten more like a real band, and it's going in a direction that I'm really proud of. It's I was inspired kind of by artists like Fleetwood Mac and The Doors and Kate Bush, and kind of artists that aren't afraid to delve into the darker side of things. And then picking up on your question about the theme, and the title track is about yeah, it's about how serial killers are romanticized and idealized in our society, and how it's kind of an ironic case of the victim egging on the murderer.
Mhm.
Like it's a well-run motor of vehicular suicide, so to say. Which I think it's a bizarre concept, but it's very true, and it exists. And I think although it could be seen as morbid, I do think like the whole idea in itself is a little bit funny. Just this, which I wanted to get across in the music video of, it's like us stabbing ourselves in the back by egging on these serial killers. It's like, oh, we love you, keep doing your great job or something. It's just bizarre but hilarious at the same time that it's so accepted in our society. Like with this Jeffrey Dahmer, um, what's it called? Like Netflix series.
Mhm.
Of course, there's going to be young budding serial killers out there that look at that and go, "Oh yeah, thanks. That's going to be great for my career when I'm older." So it's just, yeah, it's a bizarre concept, and I like going into niche bizarre concepts like that. With the rest of the album, it's kind of uh, all of the songs. There's kind of a morbid theme about them, where it's goes into the theme of a classic Halloween creature or a horror trope.
Mhm.
Um, and they're all about kind of the destruction of the body and soul, and how they're related to each other. And they're all within that dark horror realm. I like to I I got my driving license this year, just on another note. And I remember listening to the tracks, like the demos, whilst I was producing the album. Um, and there's a scene in Thelma and Louise.
Mhm.
There's a film called Thelma and Louise at the end, where, spoiler
Yeah,
alert,
yeah.
they mission and they drive straight off this cliff, and it's like their freedom from it
Yeah.
all. And I wanted, this is going to sound very morbid as well, but I wanted each of the songs to kind of have that really dramatic camp feeling to it, like that you just hit the ignition and you go off the cliff and you're just like vibing, obviously in a cinematic, playful way, of course.
Yeah.
I'm not. advising people to be driving off cliffs or anything, but I wanted it to have that real cinematic feeling to it of that you're just following the road and you're enjoying the music and you're feeling it and it's melodramatic and silly, but yeah, I don't know. I'm probably describing that in a mad way.
Well, no, actually, one thing I also enjoyed in that kind of critique you were talking about is a line here where it says, ready to commit vehicular suicide, I can say that. Sorry, read me a story like Bonnie and Clyde. And what's interesting about that line is that, like, Bonnie and Clyde were real people, but I think, like, through our kind of mythologized and, people only really know Bonnie and Clyde from that kind of Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway film that was, like, really popular. So, like, in a way, like, we're sort of blending the kind of realm of fact and fiction in a way, which actually I think to some degree your music does too, because on the one hand, I mean, it seems like the lyrics you're making are kind of fictitious scenarios, but at the same time, they're sort of it feels like anyway to me as a listener, they're kind of influenced by real world events or real world scenarios. Is that fair to say?
Um, could you maybe rephrase that? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So as when I was kind of listening to the music, it's like you know it's kind of like like knowingly over the top in a way in some
Uh-huh.
of the things you think about, but it feels like there's a grain
Yeah.
of like influence from reality in there, like when you're talking about like love songs or
Oh
something like
yeah.
that, it feels like there's that kind of grain. Yeah, I was wondering like if you could talk maybe about how much kind of fiction, how much kind of reality you sort of put together when it comes to the songwriting on the album.
Um, for me, the album was an incredibly therapeutic process. It I wrote all the songs in the last year. They kind of got me through very difficult times. Uh, so on a personal note, all of the songs are very much real and like from real experiences, and I'm really grateful to have the songs to have helped me with mental health and things like that. Um, and on the more political stance of like songs like Vehicular Suicide and singing about serial killers, um, like it's real anger that it came from. I remember writing the song, it kind of just came out of nowhere. Hearing about the Jeffrey Dahmer incident, the new Netflix series, although it is me going over the top and kind of dramatizing it the way that the media has dramatized these serial killers. It's coming from a place of real disdain and anger for all of this romanticizing of like just the most disgusting people. Like it is troubling to think that they've been put on this pedestal of, I don't know, fame, and it does trouble me a lot. And I think I'm one of those people that uses humor as a coping mechanism, which
Mhm.
isn't the worst thing, I suppose. There are worse ways to cope, but yeah, it does come from a place of real political stance and not being against this kind of idolized serial killer status.
Yeah, and actually, like with the title track, and it also sounds like Red Rum, which is of course a Shining reference. And
Hmm.
White Fang, like you see the incorporation of kind of a lot of different types of horror. Like you see, like White Fang, kind
Hello?
of the. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you just broke up there, sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
can you hear me? Okay.
yeah. Got you.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So with like White Fang, for example, you can hear the kind of incorporation of kind of like Universal horror films as well as like Hammer horror films and stuff. Um
Yeah,
yeah, and the music itself, like when you go into songs like Red Room, I mean the imagery is very violent, it's very over the top, but like the music throughout has this kind of
yeah.
bouncy vibrancy to it, and it almost seems like a kind of sarcastic take on I don't know, like you're sort of like it's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like a very contrasting thing where it's like, um, the music is like has very harsh and very like disturbing lyrics, but the music is
Hmm.
very over the top and funny. Yeah, I was wondering like if maybe you could talk about like the playful kind of nature, I guess, of incorporating the um the lyrics with the music and kind of the contrast between the two.
Yeah. Um, like as much as the true crime and like documentary series bother me, I am a huge fan of horror films. I think they're like in different realms, but although I've kind of related them to each other in this album, when it came to writing these songs, it came from a personal place, all of the songs, in my own life, but I related them. Hello,
Hey
sorry, I
George, how's it
lost you
going?
there.
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you fine now.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, you were talking just before we disconnected. You were saying like as much as you were kind of critiquing kind of real true crime and kind of the Dahmer series, you do have a love for horror films, which you were trying to express in the music.
Yeah, yeah, like songs like White Fang were very heavily inspired by films like Twilight and Nosferatu,
Mhm.
and I forget what the one is. Oh, it's the one with Johnny Depp and I don't know, but young, I forget what it is. But
Sleepy Hollow, is it?
anyway, no, it's Johnny. Oh no, Brad Pitt and
Oh, Interview with the Vampire.
um, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of like these old horror films. Well, Twilight's not that old, but like
Mm.
old vampire films where people are in love with the monster that's going to kill them, kind of relating again to the whole vehicular suicide victim being in love with their murderer.
Mhm.
And that's how it can feel sometimes in a breakup, which is just me being very melodramatic, but I suppose that's on theme for the album as well. I wanted the songs to feel like they were horror film tropes, and instrumentation wise, I really went in heavy on organs and strings, kind of orchestral kind of feelings. I wanted to add suspense in different parts with swells of strings, like seen in Bleed Me Dry.
Mhm.
Um, and again, throughout, I wanted it to feel like there was movement throughout the album, kind of like a driving playlist in a way. I did want it to be something to be listened to whilst driving, and with like kind of Kate Bushy, Fleetwood Mackie, drum beats in the background, and then in other songs like Red Rum, which is as you're saying, a Shining reference. I wanted to have this real funk housey, um, remixed kind of feel, but it's live at the same time, which is like perfect for driving. To have this crazy funk beat in the background whilst someone's singing about murder. I just think it's a really badass way to listen to music. Because, yeah, I suppose, although they're, as you're saying, it's quite morbid things I'm singing about at times, I do want it to be playful, and I suppose the feeling I want to give people is, um, I don't know, just the driving feeling. I don't know even how to describe what that feeling is, but that feeling of freedom and being alone on the road and just driving and enjoying music and being able to, I don't know, pretend that you're in Thelma and Louise.
You were mentioning when it came to the production of this album, this was the first time you actually brought in outside musicians as well. Yeah, I was wondering,
Hmm.
are you working with session musicians, or are you planning on having like a consistent band that would kind of play with you live and maybe on future recordings and such?
Yeah, everything I can't do, I bring in new musicians. I play piano and harp and guitar and sing and do backing vocals and do all my own synths and stuff. But I developed, I don't know if developed is the right word. I got together a band last year, and I was very blessed to have Steamy McKay, who is the drummer from Derry's Foreign Oil and Tramp, and he's an incredibly talented drummer, and I'm so lucky to have him in my band. Um, so yeah, I kind of said what direction I wanted the songs to go in, worked on them together, and I was so happy with what he came up with. I think he's an excellent drummer. And my bassist that is also in my band, Malcolm Boyd. Again, we just kind of developed the tunes together through practicing, and I was really happy with the outcome. So yeah, it's a constant band that I have. It's not a session musician. That's how it sounds live, which is another hugely rewarding part of this new album. Is like in the last two, I I was making something on screen and then I brought it to a band and they had to interpret what I was doing, but this time what what you're hearing in the album is what you're actually going to hear live, and it's
Mm.
really rewarding to like have it translate better onto stage, which it wasn't doing beforehand. Um, Although it allows for having really fun different versions of the other songs that I have, it's quite rewarding to be able to reproduce what is on the album more accurately on stage.
You're also mentioning, I guess one of the final things I'll talk about is you're mentioning like the production of the record. I actually didn't know it was self-produced. It's I think all your records have actually been have very high production standard, I feel. What I thought was
Thank you.
what that was kind of interesting is that, like, when you think about, because like you were talking a lot with this record about the freedom, the kind of freedom of driving, the freedom of of the music and such. I think also there's a lot of freedom in the production there. All of your records always have these like really interesting little production flares, be it like sound bites, or be it like little additional thing. I think like in it sounded like in the title track there was like a little ding of like a bake oven or something, and
All
then
right, yeah.
also and then also like on the last track, Blenderland, there's a bit of it kind of has a sort of a carnival kind of vibe to it, but there's also like a theremin, I
Hmm.
believe, in the background. At least I think it's theremin. So yeah, I was
Yeah.
wondering, like, do you think they're like being your own producer kind of adds that sense of freedom where it's like, okay, you get the bass track and you get like, you get the song, but then like you also have the freedom to then experiment with it even in post production. And do you feel like, would you like to work with external producers at some point, like maybe to get second opinions or anything like that? Or are you content self-producing from now on?
Um, well, the way I when I'm writing songs, it's already got like the music video in my head. I've already got the cinematic feeling in my head. I already know what genre it's going to be in. And then, hello?
Hey, George. We're just talking about. Can you hear me? Okay,
Sorry about that. My
that's
internet
all
is
good.
terrible.
It's all good. Yeah, we're just talking about the kind of the freedom in the production side of things.
Yeah, I suppose that's the joy of being self-produced. I I always like to feed into the eclectic side of things, and just whatever suits the story. I'm not gonna try and control a song. Each song has its own narrative, knows where it wants to go. I usually have the music video in my head whilst I'm writing. Uh, I know that if it's going to be spooky, I'm going to put organs in it, and I'm going to have spooky like building toms and stuff like that. And I just think whatever works for the song and fits the narrative. I'm not going to be cheeky and say no, you can't do this song because it doesn't fit my genre. So I'll just let the song do whatever genre it wants to do. Um, yeah, I suppose I would like to work with a producer in the future, perhaps on some projects, but I'm really quite content learning on the job. I think it's a very fun experience. It's all new to me. Well, it's a few years new to me now, but yeah, it's learning on the job and it's very fun. I enjoy it a lot. Plus, I take the songs home to for my parents to listen to it. I let my friends listen to it. I let the other band members listen to it. It's like what is it? It takes a village to raise a baby.
Yeah.
And you can call it self-produced, but of course I let other people listen to it and I like to see what they think of it. I'm not closed off to having critical thinking from other people. It's a blessing.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I do think it's cool how like you're talking about like how like you envision the music video too. Like there's all these kind of like incorporations, the kind of multimedia aspect of it too. And when it comes to actually I wanted to ask actually
Mm.
just when it came to the kind of the production of like the album art and the music videos, which I think are both really good and I think both very significant to the overall package of the record beyond just the music and the production as we were talking about. I was
Thank
wondering
you.
like how you kind of got involved with who you got involved with rather in terms of creating those.
Um, yeah, like I suppose I'm a visual artist as well. I paint. I like making films and I I don't know. I do fashion and I don't know. I've always just been creative in a visual sense as well. I make my own artwork for all of the tracks and stuff. I was very blessed to work with Michael McGlinchey on the album cover. Um, I love working with people who like they just get what I'm saying. Like when we show up on the day, I say what kind of feeling I'm trying to get across. I wanted it to be like I was in a Japanese horror film and I was looking out the car window, frightened at what was in front of me, kind of. And I think we got across that kind of melodrama and silliness, kind of, but also with the clothes I'm wearing and the old vintage car, hopefully it gave it that kind of old timey feel as well.
Yeah.
And with the music videos, yeah, I think when the story is being written, there's just this narrative along with it. And yeah, I always had the music videos in my head, and it's always fun working with different videographers. With this album, I worked with Niall Murphy. I was very blessed too because, um, when I was directing with the band and directing with like my drum and bass player, um, I didn't have to worry so much about kind of what it was going to be portrayed as because I just knew he had such a good eye for things and I could just direct what the story had to be doing, try and make sure we were getting all the right shots and yeah, I just knew that he had a good eye for what was on camera and I worried about the kind of conceptual aspect of things.
Yeah. That's perfect, man. I think I've asked everything I have to ask. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up, or maybe talk a bit about like what you have coming up?
Um, uh, I suppose I have a big Halloween album launch happening in Derry on the 29th of October, and I'll have some CDs out soon of Vehicular Suicide. Um, Other than that, I'm quite happy.
Perfect, man. It's very nice talking to you, man. I really love the record.
Okay.
Yeah, take care, man.
Thanks a million, Aaron.
No worries, George.
Thank
Thanks very
you.
much.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye. Take care. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We hope you enjoyed and stay tuned for more.